Hey everyone, it's Yui, and I have my friend Elle here. Say hi, Elle.
Hello.
Yes, and we're going to be recording a commentary for I don't know, this kind of obscure film. I don't know if you heard of it, Elle. It's called The Matrix. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's a
I
little
mean,
bit underground.
yeah, I know we've been doing a lot of bullshit, mainstream movies so far for this fucking channel. So we're gonna try to do this kind of underground sleeper hit, a little bit of an indie film for you guys. You can appreciate that. This is an audio commentary, so you can listen to it kind of alongside the film or as its own standalone podcast. And what we're going to do is do a little bit of a countdown, and then when I say go, we're both going to start watching the movie. So you can sync that up with your own copy. Three, two, one, go. Oh shit! I love it when a movie opens up with the whole they changed the logo a little bit. Ooh,
The
it's a
custom,
little bit weird.
yeah, it really sets you up to expect something different.
So I always think about this though, like, do you think they only give out so many of those, right? Because you think like everyone would want to do it, right? They'd be like, I want to change the
Yeah,
logo, I want to change it for my film, but like most films don't need that. Like
yeah.
this
I
obviously does, but
yeah, I wonder about that too. Like, if every logo is custom, then it's like, and I feel like I've seen some crazy ones that are just like really out there, um, less recognizable as the actual logo. Um, so it must require intervention from some higher up. I don't know.
yeah, I wonder who presides over that. Who gets
Bureaucracy.
to decide who gets the logo or not? Oh man, diving into the numbers. So when I watched as a kid, I legitimately had like no fucking idea what was happening for most
Yeah,
of this
yeah,
film. I just knew like, oh, it's kick ass. I like it, but like, I like in a weird way it primed me for so many things, but it took me, until I was much older to even really like get more of the subtle storytelling things in this, which is, I don't know,
yeah,
like, to be said, this isn't like an incredibly subtle film, but like there are little details that you pick on, especially now that I think you and I have collectively watched this about a fucking thousand
yeah,
times.
yeah. And can, and I want to get this out of the way. Can I make an embarrassing confession? I don't know how embarrassing this is. Uh,
L, listen. This commentary is going to be on the internet forever, so please use this as like your Catholic moment to confess your
all right,
sins.
I
Okay,
won't
I want to
confess
hear it. I want to hear it.
all my iniquities. No, it's really simple. It's just something I didn't notice, and I this is probably obvious to a lot of people other than me. But um, in the movie, when Morpheus says, uh, they're talking about dodging bullets, and he says, "When you're ready, you won't have to. You won't have to dodge bullets." And then later in the film, what does he do? There's the most literal growth shown where he tries to dodge bullets initially, and then later he doesn't dodge them. He just stops them, and it's like, oh, awesome. That's my
Damn.
embarrassing confession. I never noticed that. Well, I mean, obviously I noticed the events as they were happening, but never noticed the connection between what he says and the action later.
Well, you know, Al, we all had a chance to be dumbasses once, and now it's your responsibility to never be that stupid again.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this shit's so fucking good, man. Okay, can I tell you, it's ludicrous how good this film still looks. Like, it really is one of those things where I saw this around the same time last year when the fourth one came out, and they were like showing the first one again in theaters.
Hmm.
Can I tell you, that shit was going to church for me. I was like, I
Yeah,
am worshiping at the altar. This film looks so fucking goddamn good. Just like really, in a way that I don't know. Like, has any other '90s movie aged this well? Outside of ones that are just like
yeah,
entirely like using practical effects, like this doesn't. It looks so good, except for the one bit upcoming where you get the Dark City
yeah,
backlot from that film, and like there's very much like a kind of like an old Hollywood. I don't even know what to describe it, like a city backdrop, which
Right.
like I didn't notice until like the 50th viewing, and now I just love it. Like, because it reminds me of like in
Oh
Deus
yeah.
Ex when like you have the New York skyline and like the
Yeah.
skybox. That's what it is. It's a skybox.
Yeah, exactly. It literally is a skybox. I'm noticing it now, and it looks pretty awesome actually. Like I could
I think it
see
looks
a
great.
shot
Like, I love that shit.
in the beginning when they first start running on the roofs. Um, there's like a little bit of shaky cam where like you can see that it's just like a wall. But actually, I think it, not to be an apologist, but I think it adds to the film and
I think
and
so.
it's one
Well,
of those
that's
things.
the kind of genius of this movie, right? Is that anything artificial immediately plays into the premise, right? So like when you see Trinity do this shit that we're about to see with the jumping off and doing like the crazy like woo, like the camera spins around, like you know what I mean? Like it all feels cohesive within the text of the world. And
Yeah.
this is a reference to John Woo's A Better Tomorrow too, when you have Chow Yun
Yes.
Fat like diving down like this hotel staircase and like he like is pointing his two guns up at a window for a guy pops up and he guns him down.
What a picture. Fucking great
Yeah,
movie.
Better Tomorrow 2 rolls. So this shit, I love where like the agents just hijack a garbage truck and
Yeah.
like like just
He
completely
was
like, the most unsubtle shit. Like
yeah.
this movie beginning like this is so it just rips. It's so fucking good. I
Yes.
can't like
I think this scene is actually a great example of I think some of the parallels between the intentional parallels between Terminator and The Matrix. Uh, in fact, it's so obvious to me
oh,
now
you make
that
a good point. I didn't think about that.
because
I've never thought about that. You're fucking absolutely
yeah,
right. Holy
because
shit.
the agents are totally the Terminator. They they kind of live by the rules of this world, but they just use whatever the most effective weapon in their hand is right at that moment, including that giant truck. It's this weird thing where it's like they're super powerful, but they're technically bound by the rules, at least here.
Yeah, it's
And
this
so they
outside
just
premise.
yeah, so they have only the materials on hand, but also the framing of that truck, the way that the headlights were, I don't know, it just
Yeah,
looks like
there's
giant
like a
machinery.
that James Cameron touch to it.
Yeah,
Oh man. You know, it's funny how like this neo lifestyle of falling asleep in front of the computer, just again, aged really nicely. Now this is everyone. Everyone does
yeah.
this.
It's we love
There-
seeing this because
There's no
we
logging
can all
off.
relate to it. Yeah, I'm reminded of this tweet that was just going around where it said somewhere around the age of 12, it became my turn to go on the computer, and it never ended. I'm still, it's still my.
Oh shit. Oh god. Yeah. So I haven't seen this since the fourth one came out. Man,
Yes,
and it feels like you're just watching a new movie again, like
yeah,
in a weird way, just with all the context of that. In fact, I think that's
yeah.
like the best thing a sequel can provide is to enrich your appreciation for
Oh,
a
for sure.
previous entry, kind of in the way that like you watch Aliens and you think like, oh, Alien was pretty fucking good, wasn't it? Because
Yeah,
you're like, well, let's just do it over again, but this time with more guns.
yeah,
So like, so the idea is like there are like these underground like BDSM people who do drugs and like buy programs. Like, what is this program for? Is what I'm wondering.
uh, it's for uh parking meters, right? I think
Is it okay?
it's
Wait, hold on.
I
How do you
can't remember.
stuff a floppy disk into a parking meter? I don't know. You know what though? I don't question hackers, especially in the '90s. They were like magicians. Like they could do anything.
Yeah,
As before the goddamn government came and fucking regulated everything.
I can't remember where I got the idea where it was for parking meters or like parking.
You know what?
fuse or
That's my
something,
head
like
canon now. That's my head
to like
canon.
digitally like reset the thing. Like I swear I'm not trying to bullshit. But yeah,
You know, something I
oh my
really like
god.
about this bit is that like it's just the most efficient, effective character introduction you could possibly get. Like, and this isn't
Yeah,
the thing that I love in movies where, like with Neo, you don't know like what his entire life story is. You don't know who his family are. You don't need any of this like extraneous bullshit. Like you understand who he is through a couple of simple gestures and
yeah,
like the way he talks, and like it's entirely like
yeah.
he
He's just
like the movie is in a way like him in macrocosm. And the Rob Zombie
yeah.
Dracula,
Oh
let's
my
go. I
god.
fucking love it. You know what, if you don't like Dracula, I'm sorry, like I don't, there's no hope for you. There's no hope.
I'd go even farther. Oh,
Okay, so
Jesus.
if Carrie Ann Moss comes up to you in a club and she just starts like saying some bullshit to you, I'll be like, yes, yes, and
She she calls me my name. I've never heard the name before in my life. That is my new name. That
yes.
she has told me my new um I feel like I'm always about to say something and then somebody just like stunningly beautiful appears on screen. But that's what this movie is all about. Um but yeah, no, it's what you said about introducing Neo's character. It's like it's funny because I think especially trying to get into writing things, you notice that yourself as an amateur writer and many other amateur writers seem to it seems to always be like, okay, what's the most efficient way that I can kill my main character's family, like literally,
Absolutely.
or
Or just like leave them in
metaphorically.
some state of absence. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and you see that in anime a lot as well, for various reasons. Some of them are cultural and what have you, but it's funny because it is, I feel, hard to write like a family. You have different age groups and everything, and just trying to get rid of that. But this does such an amazing job because you don't even, it's not even necessarily a feature. It's like, yeah, they're probably out there somewhere. There's some like Midwestern boring ass family. It's like, you know, the most interesting aspect is this son who went off and works at a software company
Yeah.
and a big
So
doing big thing.
like the whole intro section of this movie is kind of somewhat like indistinct in my head now from just the totality of Bound, their first movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And like it's very much, it's still like that same like weird kind of neo noir world. And
Hmm.
I think it's like such a smart decision for them to like begin in that grounded but stylized aspect, and then like just totally implode it. And the way this movie plays with noir conventions and with
Yeah,
martial arts conventions and stuff, I mean, it's just so incredibly smart. And like I think a lot of people now, like when they look at this movie, because so much has been influenced by it, and because so much of it has been seen as this like, oh, it cribs from this and it cribs from Philip K. Dick and it cribs from the Invisibles or whatever. Like then people look at it and say like, oh, well, that means that because it's like influence, then the Matrix is bad. Then, which I don't think
yeah,
is
yeah,
true at all. I think to make a movie like this with that many influences and to synthesize it into something that's really cohesive and interesting still, I mean, that's fucking hard to do. Like when I
yeah,
watch this movie, every time I feel like, man, it's like I witnessed a miracle, because there's no
yeah,
way that in most of the universe this should have worked, and yet somehow
yeah,
it does. And like I don't know, it just it feels so um so much of like when you look back at the trends in 90s Hollywood cinema, you feel like the Matrix is like, it's like almost like
yeah.
it like defines everything that came before it and after it, and
Yeah, yeah,
it just like sets all these rules and then just dismantles all these other rules. And like the when you look at like the huge trend in 90s neo noir movies, it's like after the Matrix, it's like where do you go from there? There's nowhere to like we've we've already pushed this form really as far as it could possibly go, and now I don't know, like it's again, this is one of those films. It kind of it's like Star Wars, where it's difficult to talk about because so much has already been said. But like,
yeah,
I still feel like this is I don't know, like just as modern, if not more modern, than any films that come out now. Just because of, I mean, like my God, everything is so directed. Like, there's not a scene in this that there's no second unit. There's no fucking like,
yeah,
oh, we just tossed off this shot. Oh, we reshot this. No, every camera movement in this, every choice of lighting, it's all so distinct and hyperbolic and designed to give you the maximum impact of the story they're trying to tell.
yeah,
And
yeah,
to have that degree of focus when you're trying to have these ambitions, I like, again, I don't even know how it gets done. It really, like,
yeah,
it's just nuts to me.
yeah. I mean, you know me. I love movies and shit that feels like it shouldn't exist. In the best possible way. Like it. You
Like
know,
Zardoz.
yeah. Maybe not exactly like Zarda, but uh, which I still need to go back and see. But um, movies that are so ambitious and have so much going for them, and or like so much passion put into them, essentially what you would call in any other situation passion projects, and they still get made, and you know through some fluke of the universe, it feels like. um, and and
I mean, it's a
you know
credit to Joel Silver as the producer of this, because like Joel Silver is a notorious Hollywood maniac. But like you look
yeah.
at the films he produces, and he works with good directors, and he like he's made a lot of masterpieces. And so you got to think like he watches Bound, and he looks at the sisters and is like, okay, you want to do
Yeah.
this crazy thing? All right, here's however much money, these millions of dollars, and yeah, you can do it. I'm sure, right? And you know, that's kind of like what I miss is that you had that kind of like, who gives a fuck, just go for it, cocaine addled attitude that
Yeah.
resulted in something like this being so again uncompromised and so daring, and like nothing in this is out of place. Like it all just sings like a
Yeah.
beautiful orchestra. And I mean, like this whole bit with the like, you look at like the old school TVs that then show up
Yeah.
when Morpheus is talking to him later. Like everything is just fitted. There's like, but it's not like overly tight or constricting in terms of the form,
Mhm.
right? It's so
Oh yeah.
it still feels joyous and expressive, even as it is like meticulously constructed.
Yeah. And we're 17 and a half minutes into this movie. I feel like it's been 4 minutes. The
I know,
pacing
right? It moves
here,
so quickly.
is amazing. And but it's not that it doesn't allow the scenes and the characters to breathe. Like when Agent Smith just sat down, and he just like he kind of flips out his arms,
It's like but you
and just like
celebrate every
relax.
moment of the character, right? It's like whatever the character does, you're like, oh, that guy. You know what I mean? Like you feel
Yeah.
there's such a enthusiasm in what's going on. And okay,
And
let's just talk about it. Hugo Weaving, the god. I'm
Hugo
sorry, like
Weaving,
this is one of the greatest performances I've ever seen. Like
Elrond
he's
himself, Elrond
yeah,
himself.
he like I just like this performance in this movie. Like there's so many great actors here, and like we'll talk about them, I'm sure, in a bit. But Hugo Weaving, I really think that like he doesn't get the recognition for his work in the Lord of the Rings films and in this movie. And like it just feels like these essential touchstones of culture are really
Yeah,
wrapped up
yeah,
in like what he does. Like you think about Lord of the Rings, he is the elf, right? Like it's not Legolas, it's fucking
Yeah.
Elrond. And whenever I say that, I immediately think of like, am I talking about the elf or am I talking about LRH? But um, yeah, the I mean, like the way he goes about this, he's he's one of these great actors, right? That we love, who just relishes being able to play the villain part and just
Yeah.
knows each button to push and knows how to be like where you hate him, but you don't hate hating him, right? You enjoy the
Yeah.
emotion of hatred towards him, and you're like, ah, fuck this guy, but also like I appreciate his presence, and that's so hard to do
Yeah.
because that's not like a lot of actors go too far and they just end up as like either despicable or like they got a soft foot on it and they don't really go as far as you need them to. Whereas Hugo Weaving, his performance is so like the way that he'll enunciate on weird syllables and like it's so like you can't exaggerate how he makes this movie into something that's like because like if you don't believe in him you don't believe in the oppressive power of the
Yeah.
Matrix. You really don't.
The
Like he's the
the
symbol of
movie
it.
yeah, the movie starts to falter if you don't believe in his character. And I mean, it's so hard not to believe in his character that it's a credit to him and the movie. Um, but yeah, it's playing the heel, is what you is described. It's like
So but I like this like
the
when his mouth closes and like you get a reaction shot of him just being like, isn't that interesting? And like
like
he's so happy and content with like the
yeah,
arbitrary horror of this system and like
yeah. You get it's like the look that says like no matter how many times I do this, it never gets old,
I know he's
Like
Jesus.
he
Oh dude,
truly hates humans.
this fucking like nightmare bug creature that they insert into his navel, this shit gives me fucking nightmares, dude.
Yeah.
Like it legitimately, like as a kid, I would like make sure that the blanket was always over my belly button because I was like, I don't want that thing to
It
crawl inside me.
it was horrifying to me. I mean, it still is, but I was like I mentioned earlier, I have the the coffee table book, The Art of the Matrix, and I was just looking at that scene actually. Apparently it was one of the first scenes that was illustrated because, in the concept art, Neo had like long hair and stuff. But
Oh,
that
really? Okay,
scene, the
interesting.
yeah, the insertion and the bug extraction are basically almost like one to one to the actual movie. And uh, yeah, like you said, it's like a comic book. It's
Well, in a way, this and Raiders of the Lost Ark are probably like the
oh
most
yeah,
storyboarded films in film history. Really,
yeah,
it's not an exaggeration to say that they almost existed in graphic novel form than before there
yeah,
were
yeah.
movies, which you can feel and I think is great. And in a funny way, like none of the other Wachowski films feel like that. So that gives these unique energy. This original trilogy, because like Bound also has that texture, and they
Hmm.
get a lot more looser as they go along in their filmography. But
Mm,
like the tightness of these first four films like gives it I don't want to say like a mannered quality, but um there's a certain again a control and a measure that like is very reminiscent of Hitchcock and of Sam Fuller
mm,
and these very considered directors who are almost like in some ways over stylized. But for a film like this,
yeah.
especially the time it came out with, it feels just like the pitch perfect amount of style.
Hmm.
And like look at this, like the rain and everything. Like this is so you could imagine a scene like this in Bound where you just have such an amount of texture. And of course, like
Yeah,
you have all this symbolism with like the rain and then the code of the Matrix looking like rain with all the language falling down and all the visual metaphors of the movie just
yeah,
they like it's not like oh here's a symbol, it's that it's all connected within a tapestry. It's almost like the film itself creates a language that you then get taught how to read.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah, I
one
don't even
thing,
see the movie anymore, Al. I just
yeah.
just see the code.
uh, One thing I noticed in my brief little look through the art book before I started watching was like it seems like in the words of the artists, they're talking about how the Wachowskis described like each scene to them, and like the actual physical, or I'm sorry, the visual aspects of the movie had some sort of meaning in themselves, like the part later where he gets um, the metallic substance of the mirror or the glass substance like on his hand, and it starts to spread all over. It's it's like described as like reflecting all the different faces of Neo, and like reflecting on into infinity and stuff. And it's like,
Yeah, like that bit specifically, that's straight up from Grant Morrison's The Invisibles. Like there's
oh, okay.
totally like I don't want to get too much into it, but like that comic, I mean, like this movie wouldn't exist without that comic. And
Yeah,
like it's but in a good way where you have oh my god, this
yeah.
scene. Look at this. This is like a Tim Burton thing, like with the
Oh,
huge
yeah.
building and like the camera looking down and the rain and oh my god. It's
That,
like
yeah.
oh, I love a good spiral staircase with the
Yeah.
checkerboard pattern on the
Oh
floor.
my god. Yeah, and just kind of going back to what you said earlier, this might not be what you meant exactly, but I think it's a good tie-in, is when you mentioned how it kind of defines the movies that came after and came before. I'm thinking about a lot of the movies made in the 90s, just specifically if you just keep it to the 90s. uh there are so many movies that have little bits and pieces of the same concepts or the visual direction, like, Strange Days, maybe even Virtuosity, like Johnny Mnemonic for
Truman
sure,
Show.
and Truman
Oh,
Show,
and
yeah,
Dark
and
City, of course. Dark City
Dark
is
City.
like the weird dry run for this movie, which I and
Yeah.
to anyone who hasn't seen Dark City, fucking watch it because it rules. But
Oh man. See,
like Dark City feels like the dumb guy like flat Earth version of the Matrix, but I think in a way
yes.
that's like its own quality to it.
Yeah, and that director Alex Proyas, I want to see more of his movies, because Dark City and The Crow have such an intense visual direction that is similar to The Matrix, but very unique, and I've never seen anything like it since.
Yo, you should
Um,
watch and to like anyone who's listening, watch like the Nick Cage film Knowing. Underrated
okay,
movie. It's quite good. It's like some real Gnostic shit, and also has like some Men in Black in it who are very similar to like the
damn.
agents that we have in this movie.
I was gonna I was gonna go to Dark City and briefly touch on uh, a movie which I just rewatched, Highlander 2, The Quickening,
Highlander
Renegade
2, The
version.
Great.
And if you really want to trace this lineage, like, and you want to watch a weird movie, um, that movie actually reminds me a lot of Dark City and The Crow in a way that is also somehow part of the continuum that led to this movie.
Well, it's that
Um,
post Tim Burton like
yeah,
overproduced,
yeah,
very like post music video style,
yeah,
where like there's like constant rainy streets and again you we can take this as back as we want, but like even
yeah,
Streets of
yeah,
Fire has echoes of that and
yeah,
like
yeah,
this creation of these hermetically sealed set bound worlds that the Matrix has. But what's cool about the Matrix is that it almost like flattens that into its ontology rather than just explicitly in uh like just how the film looks, right? So the film is actually pretty open with a lot of scenes. It doesn't have that claustrophobic
yeah,
feeling, but because it's rendered into the narrative texture of how the movie works and how like the whole simulation is constructed, you do get that
yeah,
like omnipresent Gnostic viewpoint that like you can kind of feel echoes of that, like you said, in those late '80s and early '90s movies of like Highlander 2, where it feels like you're in like this weird little microcosm of a city that
yeah.
like Christopher Lambert's flying a goddamn disc around or whatever.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Which, which is which is
And
the
also,
other thing I
Highlander
was
has
gonna
all the sword
briefly.
fight stuff. Like
Yeah,
the weird bringing martial arts into American cinema, which is interesting.
yeah. That was the other thing I was gonna mention in the little. it's kind of like a Green Goblin like vehicle thing in
Yeah,
Highlander 2.
glider.
In that scene, there's these two characters, these guys that they send back from the future, and they are the twins from Matrix Reloaded. They are like the same
You're right. Yeah.
fucking
Oh shit! I never
antagonist
thought about
character.
that.
Wear these goggles and they have this weird hair.
You know
I
what? If I ever
I'm
speak to Lana
convinced.
or Lily, I'm 100% going to
Oh,
ask them, are you guys fans of Highlander 2? What do you think of
ask
Highlander
them
2?
for me. Ask them for me.
Yes,
Like if nothing else.
I definitely will. Oh man. So now like we're getting to the real shit of like Lawrence Fishburne, the great, the impeccable, like the astonishing Lawrence Fishburne. Can we sing his praises higher? Because
I think.
like talking about a guy who's just done so much service for cinema as an art form. Like to me, he is almost like a Marlon Brando esque guy. Like
I
every role I
agree.
see him in, I'm more and more impressed. I'm like, wow, this guy was. I mean, not even was is like just a again like a talent that you cannot overstate. I just,
I
I mean, like
we
in King of New York and in
yeah,
fucking Deep
yeah.
Cover. I mean, he's just so goddamn good.
King of New York. I saw not too long ago. He was amazing in that. Uh, it's amazing how seeing that and seeing Deep Cover and then seeing this, and it's kind of like that's kind of like this weird continuum of like like when he's trying to act like a sleaze bag to when he's trying to act almost totally
What's like him going
stoically
from a
or like a
character actor to like a leading man type
yeah
role. And what's so
yeah
great about this movie is that he basically is giving like a like leading man charisma, right? But he's playing
yeah
the kind of Obi-Wan figure,
yeah he's
and
playing the mentor.
like, I mean, look, is there anyone in the history of movies that you would want to teach you shit more than Lawrence Fishburne? Because I don't think so. Because he's
Yeah,
right. He's the right combination of like enthusiastic and serious, and also
mhm,
like very much an ass kicker, but he's not a jerk, right? Like he just
yeah
feels like just this sagely figure. Like when I watched as a kid, it made such an impression on me. Where like when he enters the film, you feel an entire trust in who he is and what he represents, and like
yeah.
again, similar thing with Hugo Weaving. That's not easy. Like that could have gone so wrong with a different actor, and
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. You just it's
And
interesting
it's a
because you
hard
see.
thing.
Oh, go ahead.
It's a hard thing to do to like be able to put that on screen as the actor. I feel like yeah, I wouldn't fault an actor for not being able to do it, but the fact that you know that Hugo Weaving and Lawrence Fishburne are so good is why it works.
Yeah, when you think about how like Lawrence Fishburne was originally going to be Jules in Pulp Fiction, and he was up for all these different roles that he kind of passed on,
Hmm.
and like I think again in a worse timeline we would have never like gotten his turn in these movies. But I mean
Hmm.
like thank God we did. Seriously,
Yeah.
he's you know again every time I watch these again I'm like, man, is like Lawrence Fishburne are we just like the most undervalued talent in history? Like why wasn't this guy
Yeah.
like why doesn't he have like 8 Academy Awards? I think
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
fucking he deserves them
See.
again for he's so good at King of New York. He's like one of the best supporting performances you'll ever see because he's instantly iconic. He's like, I'm drinking
Yeah.
root beer. He's so good.
And you know how much I love deep cover. I feel like that's really like I actually still need to see like more of his stuff that's where he's actually, the lead, uh but deep cover I feel like shows shades of Larry Fishburne that, you know, you get it a bit in the Matrix too, but it's like, that neo crime thriller like he's like a quiet guy, but then he starts to get loud
Yeah, he's
when
great
he's
at
pushed to the
modulating that
edge.
like that whole thing of like, all right, I'm gonna, be at this level, and you think I won't go any
Yeah.
further, but now I'm. Oh, and of course, like, I don't know what we're talking about. I mean, the man was in Apocalypse Now, right? Like,
Oh
it's just,
shit.
it's totally
I forgot
nuts.
about
He's in Apocalypse Now. Okay, and I don't know how I got away with this. Event Horizon,
Oh,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
one of the
For
greatest
sure.
horror movie performances. you know, we're leaving. God. And Event Horizon itself does have like some interesting proto Gnostic material in
Oh
it,
yeah, yeah.
and like that movie came out like what, 97, so like, yeah, like right before this. And
Yeah.
yeah, like,
Yeah,
again, it feels like
that's
the
another one.
like so many trends in the 90s just, were trying to find their way towards, this
E-
maximal
ex-
idea of themselves. And
exactly.
and then, in 1 year, when you have The Matrix and Eyes Wide Shut coming out, it's like, all right, we did it, we fulfilled it,
Yeah.
everything is, we we finally hit the nail on the head.
See, and yeah, and I think this is, could be considered a little bit of a, I don't know, kind of a working backwards type way of thinking about it, but it's like, in a way, it's like you feel like the Matrix shouldn't exist, but also the opposite, that it was fated to exist, because like we were talking about
Exactly.
the movies that came before, whether or not they were even seen by the Wachowskis, or they all had this very similar aesthetic in certain ways, and also just way of directing, like um I keep thinking of stuff like Strange Days, really, and just every sci-fi thriller basically that came in the decade or
What
two
It's
before.
so nuts to watch Giant Mnemonic, because that came out like
Yeah,
4 years
yeah,
before this, and Giant Mnemonic feels so archaic in a good way. It's
yeah,
fun, like it's the William Gibson cyberpunk, but
yes,
think about that, like 4 years, like that. Those Giant Mnemonic and The Matrix feel like they come out in different centuries. It
yeah,
feels like
totally.
it's like the cavemen jumping into the Renaissance. It's just completely bonkers. Yeah, this shit. Look at, like, it got like there's like a quasi like acupuncture aspect to
Yeah.
what's going on here. Oh, like, again, people make fun of them for it. I love all the chintzy Wachowskis new age horse shit that they put in their movies. It's so fun to me. I just love it. Like, I mean, like, Cloud Atlas is really the apex apogee, whatever, of that, where it's like, love and hope uniting people across time and space and all that. I mean, and that's eventually what these this trilogy culminates in too, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I mean, it's just so hyper earnest, and I don't know. I would much rather have that than the kind of like faux mature cynicism that I think we've been, accustomed to, where everything has to be
yeah,
ironic and no one can actually be in love or feel emotions, or like have fun without there being some kind of self-conscious element to it. Like, this is not a
hmm,
self-conscious movie. This is so Everything the Wachowskis do is so deadly earnest, and
yeah,
sometimes to a fault, sometimes to great benefit. And like, you can't pull off a
yeah,
vision like this unless you believe in it. Because, like, look at this nonsense. They're in like a like a spaceship that's designed like a submarine, like an industrial submarine from the 1920s, right? Like, that's another thing I love about this movie, is that the Matrix itself, like, kind of looks, with like the slightly aquamarine green,
hmm,
kind of slightly blown out look it has inside it. And then you get to the quote unquote the real world, and it looks like shit. Like, everything looks
yeah.
cold and industrial and like hospitable.
It's
And
Gunmetal
like, you
Gray. It looks like a industrial music video.
yeah, it does 100%. It's like, oh man, is Trent Reznor playing in here? Like, when we get in the
Yeah.
Ministry, like it. And like it, but what I like about that is that it's visual storytelling, where like you immediately understand why Cipher later in the movie is going to act like a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Because you're like, what,
Yeah.
I would be pissed off too, where like I'm living my normal life, and then I wake up and you're like, okay, this is the real world, and it's like, oh, I'm in hell. Great. Like, I
Yeah.
can't walk
Yeah.
out. There's no grass. There's no like trees. I can't see the sun because the world is like apocalyptic. Like that's such a cool inversion from, I think, the usual thing, where it's like, oh, when you wake up into the when you break past the true illusion, right? Like in like stories like The Giver, or even in a lot of Philip K. Dick stories,
Hmm.
where you get out of the system and then, oh my god, it's it's the kind of utopia or whatever that's on the other side that's being hidden. In this, it's like, nope, it's fucking Garbo. The utopia is the
Yeah.
lie.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So when do you think we're getting this? When can I start injecting like programs into my brain with like a look like a giant spike? When can I do this?
I can. I don't know when, but I can say that I won't be beta testing for any company.
But you're telling me you're not gonna be one of the first Matrix
Yeah, I'm
people
not
who
gonna get.
then gets turned into an AI?
What's funny is like Valve, the game company. Well, Gabe Newell in particular apparently was and is like very interested in kind of like implants and stuff like that, and what you can do with the brain when connected to software. And it's like, yeah, that is really interesting, but also
Also, no, like
don't
I don't
test
want
it
the
on me.
guys. I don't want the guys who made fucking Team Fortress 2 to have access to my brainstem. I
Yeah.
think I'd rather not. Can you imagine? They're like, all right, we're gonna sell you hats in your own head. No, no thanks.
Yeah.
No, I would
Yeah.
prefer not to.
Look, I'm probably the biggest Half-Life Half-Life 1 like fan that I I've ever known. Half-Life 2 possibly as well, and you know what? It's all right. I'll let them do whatever. It's another example of just like, I'm a huge fan of the Matrix. You can do pretty much whatever for the rest of your career, and I'm just, if it looks good, I'll tune in. But otherwise, like, do all you live your crazy dream, you crazy shine on, you crazy diamond, basically.
No, no, thank you. I will avoid it as much as I can. Yeah, like so this whole bit, I don't think it can be over estimated how much of an influence this had on people like you and me into poisoning
Hmm.
our brains and making us read
Yeah.
like the Nakamati library and all that horse shit. Um, but yeah, like so he's talking about like how the Matrix designed is like the apex of human civilization at the end of the 20th century, right? So the idea is that the Matrix is like 1999, right? That's the year it's set in, basically.
Hmm.
And what's so fascinating about this movie is that, like in retrospect, you kind of think like, like what are people nostalgic over? Like oh, they're
Yeah.
nostalgic over like an era before like the internet basically poisoned everyone's brains, and
Yeah.
like before there was like a total uh an idea of like the digital like pluralistic culture, but also like simultaneously a monoculture more than ever. And
Yes. Yeah.
like 1999 is really the last time where like the internet exists and it's a thing, and you have guys like Neo who are like hackers, right? But it's not this like thing where it's just a part of everyone's life. It's more of like this like kind of specialist tool that's you have
Yeah.
to kind of be
Yeah.
a specialist for some of it. And you look at people talking about now, and again there's all this like 90s nostalgia, and it's just kind of funny how you can understand the thought process of the machines being like, all right, we don't actually want you to like have smartphones in our simulations. We want you to
Yeah.
you know like have a weirdly more advanced yet simplistic uh time where you have like globalization but not again the digital part of it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
It's.
like, oh man, this shit's fucking horrifying. I was Whenever I watch this, I'm
It's.
always like, oh man, please don't let that baby drown. um yeah, the thing about that though is that when you think about Matrix Resurrections, they kind of scale it
Mhm.
up a little bit. They push the
Yeah.
timetable, and like Matrix Resurrections does feel, like in 2021, right? Like people were walking
Yeah.
around with phones and shit. And so like that was an interesting choice that they made, not to like keep it locked in that time frame like these movies are.
Yeah. It's the Matrix in 2021. It's because you be on that phone. Uh, it's, yeah, yeah. They were just like, yeah. How can we?
It's because
change
you
the
listen to
form of
your
control.
therapist.
Yeah, yeah, no. Oh man, can I tell you, I loved the memes that came out of that. Just like the anti-psychiatry like
It's
memes
so good.
and,
It was
and
so
shit.
good, and people got really
Just
pissed
like,
about that shit too.
oh
And
man,
can I tell you, like, anyone, I don't know, like, it's a logical extension of this kind of stuff because the
yeah,
agents
yeah,
and Agent Smith are, it's again, it's like the authoritarian, like
yeah.
police
They
slash
just,
military slash government, right? Like that hybrid of like the boot on your neck.
mhm.
And in Resurrections, it's like, well, what's the soft version of that? It's the fucking person
Yeah,
who basically crushes your dreams with, kindness and, keeps you medicated all the time and like,
yeah, exactly.
doesn't want you to kill yourself because that means you're not a productive worker, and like that really
Yeah,
sinister side of manipulative psychology and all that kind of shit. And that's, again, that's as much of a part of the oppressive apparatus as something like the Matrix as, a guy with, running around with a Desert Eagle and a two-piece suit.
absolutely. And I think also very much tied into that, the different way that they show what work looks like in the Matrix. Like from Neo's perspective, in the first movie, they have this kind of authoritarian boss. You know, it's like cartoonish, but on
Well,
purpose.
it's
You
the
know,
Gen X Fight
um,
Club nightmare, right? Of like, oh
yeah,
my god, I
yeah,
have to
yeah,
work in this like
and
monotonous office that has like no creativity and no joy, and it's just
yeah,
strictly like mechanistic and
and
it's only like consume and produce and like that whole thing.
yeah, and then and then in Resurrections, it's the opposite. He is the boss, but there's like, there's this overabundance of seeming creativity, and yet it's not, it doesn't feel free at all. Like he has the reins to the machine of like this game
Yeah, it's the
company or
illusion of
whatever, and like,
control. It's the idea that like,
yeah,
yeah, you're at the head of this, but like again, when they're like, we need to produce a sequel, and
yeah,
he's
yeah.
like, well, we already completed the story, and they're like, yeah, but we're doing this with or without you, and he's like, well, I guess it's like you're at the top, but you don't get to decide what you get to be on top of, and
Yeah,
yeah, like that whole like very interesting dichotomy where it's almost like you got like his hacking was like an underground thing, and now in
yeah,
Matrix 4, it's like all right, now like you're the great artist, but also your artistry is again overdetermined by all these hyper
yeah,
commercial concerns. And yeah, that scene was so genius where they're like, what is the Matrix? It's cool kick-ass fights, it's philosophy,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
liberation in a bottle. You know what I mean? Like they just talk about all these
yeah.
various things.
I That one sticks in my mind. But yeah, I also wanted to say from my perspective, as I was never ever like high up in this role, but as somebody who worked in
Are you about
software,
to
and
expose some kind of
well,
secrets that you gained out? Please tell us more.
not not exactly secrets. It's just anybody who's worked, whether or not they've worked on software or not, if they've worked in an office like that, it's like it was kind of good at showing like there's some work that needs to get done, but then there's all these rituals in the office based around basically letting everybody feel like they've had their say in the process,
Yeah, these
which can be
performative
good and
things.
bad, but it ends up being, yeah, very like kind of for the act of it in a lot of cases. And uh yeah, that just further contributes to like uh just like the disillusionment of somebody working in those environments. Um, it feels very like, wow, this world is like not real.
Yeah, yeah. There's kind of like these softer forms of control where it's you
Exactly.
you have to consent to your own misery.
Yeah. And that's, yeah. I no longer work in that, and it did for a while feel like I was stepping out into the real world, because I was like, you know, your boss tries to like hold your hand but also discipline you, and it becomes this very fucked up relationship, you know. uh
Yeah,
and it's like nothing is like a problem, everything is like an opportunity. And you know yeah, I don't know. It's very kind of dystopian in a way. Probably the wrong word, but
You know. Yeah, what I love about this film too is that like I know all the characters' names and stuff. You know, it's like
yeah,
Tank and Dozer and fucking Switch and all this. And like Switch doesn't really have that like many lines, but like I can never forget her. I can't get her out of my head
yeah.
because that fucking terrible death that like haunts my memory is
Yeah,
so fucking terrible.
it sticks in my mind. it
Oh
it
my
really
god. So
gives the impression of somebody who you want to get to know, and then you're
well they
deprived
feel
of,
lived in. They feel
you know.
like real people
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
know it's just like really effective characterization. So it's again the importance of Yuan Wu Ping to this movie
yes.
and the
Tell us
sequels.
about this. Tell us about
Oh
this,
my god.
Yui.
Well, so what I found out is like essentially
His face.
like essentially they they invited him to work on the movie and like Yuen Ping has talked about this with working on Kill Bill where like on Kill Bill he actually wasn't allowed to do that much because Tarantino had
Mm.
such a strong control over like I want this and this shot and like I want to recreate this specific thing from a 70s
Of
movie and like what I
course.
mean he had a very considered idea of what that was supposed to be on Kill Bill. Whereas in this, like the Wachowskis were like, well, we kind of know what we want, but like also, can you just make something that's like cool as shit? And
Yeah.
as you're seeing, like he fucking listen, they let the chef cook, and here's the meal. I mean, it's it's so funny because like something like Speed Racer does have something of this kineticism, but as much as I like Matrix Four, that movie really, really doesn't have this. Like, it doesn't have the
Yeah.
Yuan Ping style that he brings, and like he's almost, I would argue, like in a way, he's almost like a third co-director on this movie, and then
Yeah.
especially the second one with how many martial arts fights are in there, and I think
Absolutely.
like he may or may not have wanted that credit, but I think it should be acknowledged that like the way that he stages this stuff, like the Wachowskis obviously had input, but I think to a large degree they let him, kind of do what he's best at. And again, when you look at like Once Upon a Time in China or Iron Monkey or In the Line of Fire, no, not In the Line of Fire, in the Line of Duty for, although Yuen Ping having Clint Eastwood in a martial arts
Yeah, I
will
was
be
gonna
incredible.
say.
Can we get that? Um, yeah, but you watch those Hong Kong movies, and what's so cool is that you know, when you had those directors and these auteurs getting brought over to the States during this period, a lot of their stuff got butchered. Like John Woo's American
Yeah.
stuff, a lot of it's pretty good. Hard Target's great. Mission Impossible 2 is fun. But like, it's not too much of a scratch on what he was able to do with like The Killer or Hard Boiled or,
Yeah.
Better Tomorrow. And so like you kind of feel like I got it, but I don't really have it. Whereas this, you fully have it. Like this is Yuan Ping's style. This is how he stages stuff. It's all very much in these like sweeping camera movements, and then you get
Hmm.
like cuts to like impact points, right? So like you'll get a close up on a person's fist with a zoom, and
Yeah.
you know like he really invented this whole like the modern quote unquote wire fu style that comes
Yeah.
from his wuxia movies that he did. And oh, it's right with What's My Time in China. What I meant was the second one because I think he did the choreography for that and not the first one. I'm
Mm.
pretty sure. um but yeah, it's like it's so immediate, and you never, again, even like the Kill Bill stuff, it's so much more trying to look like the 70s stuff, whereas this feels much more in
Hmm.
line with his more modern style that he was able to pull off with the advances in technology and what they were able to do, with just again more wire stuff.
Yeah.
And the bit where it's like, oh, I just downloaded into Google Maps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good. Also, okay, this bit also from the Invisibles, like with the buildings,
Oh yeah.
like very much 100%. Yeah, have you read that by the way?
It's still on my shelf. I
Oh,
gotta
please,
read it.
please,
You
please
know
read it
what?
sometime. You will enjoy
After
it.
this, yeah, after this, I will carve out some time in my day to, because I started reading it just a little bit. I didn't get around to
Yeah, but
going
you'll see
through
what
it.
I mean. It comes up very early
Yeah,
in that graphic
yeah,
novel, and like that whole first arc of that, I can't help but think like there was something going on. But yeah, I love this. Like Keanu's so good at playing these like kind of subtly kind,
yeah,
very earnest people that like he's not. What I like about him is that even when he's basically playing like a murderous psycho, like in John Wick, you always like him
yeah,
because he kind
yeah,
of has this like hapless puppy dog feeling that the world just never
yeah,
quite works out for him, and so that's why it's kind of such a triumph at the end of this to like see him just like, all right, God mode activated, turn on all the
yeah.
cheats, and it's as cool as hell. Uh,
He's. I mean, he's kind of the underdog. You just naturally want to root for him.
Yeah, and
It's a
Speed,
perfect
where like
premise.
Dennis Hopper's like, I'm smarter than you, I'm smarter than
Yeah,
you, like he's so good at kind of tapping into that. Uh, like he just has an innate kindness to him as a performer that I think is so attractive on screen. And I think when he's put up against really formidable odds, again, like in these action movies that he's done, um, I think he works so good because you feel like there's a kindness, but there's also a resolute determination to what he does.
hmm
And so in Point Break, even when he does like the dumbest shit possible in Point Break, you kind of feel like it's like the Heat thing, right? You want him to get Bodhi, but at the same time, you kind of want him and Bodhi to like make out, and there's this tension
yeah.
here, right? Where like you want these like opposite things to happen, and yeah, like
It's the dialectic, you. It's I'm
oh
just
yeah,
kidding.
it's dialectics. It's what Hegel talked about. No, not the great,
Yeah,
the
and
great,
I was gonna say
incredible Joey
earlier,
Pants.
if
Joey
if
Pants,
we're
the
paying
man.
tribute, if we're paying tribute to the greats in this movie, Joey Pantoliano, he has to be talked about. He is fucking perfect. So
Yeah, I mean,
good.
he's in so many movies, so many great movies.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like he's one of those guys where he just improves whatever he's in, and you feel he almost always just plays jerk offs or
yeah.
angry men, and you're like, ah, okay, like this guy. But at the same time, the movie would lose texture if it didn't have someone like him.
The speech
Oh,
is
and see,
so
like
perfect.
the
It works
John Woo
on.
thing of this, where like the juxtaposition between like high frame rate and then normal frame rate, and like
Yeah.
that back and forth, like it extends to more than just the like the fight stuff. It's also just within the like the editing language of the movie, and I think that's why it works so well. Is that it doesn't feel like, all right, here we're going to deploy this little bit of style and just do it for its own sake. Instead, it's very well considered of like, okay, how do we, if we're going to incorporate this, how do we use the entire language of um, even conversations to reflect that.
hmm
Also, even I don't even know how they did this. Like this whole thing where like
Yeah.
everyone's frozen. Like I really don't understand how this is visually
Yeah.
accomplished.
I think let me
Also,
get
this
a
stuff about
couple simultaneous.
gatekeepers. I mean, I don't know. Like for people who don't know about trans shit, I guess like it's lost on them. But like literally using the term gatekeeper. I mean, like my God, right? Like you cannot. It's it's all there if you're looking for it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Whenever Lawrence Fishburne talks, I'm just like, oh, maybe I should just shut up and listen to Lawrence
Yeah.
Fishburne.
My feelings exactly.
So I'm gonna like try and buy like a tan trench coat in a couple days, if you ever decide to like rock the black one, just go full Columbine and be like,
Oh my god.
man, maybe I should. I feel like you can
I
now.
think
I feel like there's a time where you couldn't get away with it, but I think you can get away with
yeah.
it now. It's coming
I
back
think
in the season.
maybe a gray one would be a good compromise too. I'm not sure. It depends on. It would be a case by case basis.
I think
Um,
the trench coat that China and Fat wears in the Better Tomorrow, I think that's gray. I'm pretty sure.
oh, okay.
He's got the overcoat, but then he has the other coat that he wears.
Yeah, yeah. That's the other thing. A lot of those movies, you realize just how many people like the gang bosses and stuff. They just always wear that same coat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
Well, the thing that
it's
always
like
kills me in the
scarf.
John Woo movies is when you have like the obnoxious bad guy who wears like all white trench coat and a suit
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like it's such a
yeah,
funny like he's just obsessed with that like these weird images of like contrasting purity and impurity and
yeah.
reflecting that with people's how like what they wear. And that's I mean, you were talking about the twins earlier like
Hmm.
in Matrix Reloaded, that's totally how they dress. Like they all wear all white and got the same coats.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever happened to those guys? Whatever happened to them? Where'd they go?
Yeah,
Can
I don't
someone find
know.
this out? Whatever happened to those twins from Matrix Reloaded? They got to be
What
still
did?
bopping around somewhere.
Where are they now?
They should have showed up in Resurrections. I think that's my opinion. They should have showed up again. That would have been fun
I
because they
agree.
had the goddamn what's his name, Le Frenchman.
Yeah, Merovingian.
Yeah,
Um,
Merovingian. Yeah, they had that guy show up again for like 2 seconds. So why not? Oh, I love the design for like the spider like squid machines here.
yeah,
They're so cool. Are there any toys of them?
they're.
There's gotta be,
Oh
right?
yeah, there's at least statues I know.
Someone has got to. Well, I know like in Matrix 4, like he has one in his office. He's got like a
Oh
little
yeah,
statue of one. Yeah. Right next to his goddamn World of Warcraft models.
I gotta watch that again. I'm yeah.
See,
I
and
feel like
something I appreciate
the
about oh, go ahead.
sorry. I feel like the introduction to Cipher, the first conversation is this is like when you like work at a new job and then it's like that you know period after the honeymoon period where you find out that like everybody hates each other at at the job or or at least there's like
Right, they
you
stop
start finding out
pretending.
about yeah you start finding out about like the various frictions in the workplace
Yeah,
uh
something I
and
appreciate about this movie with Cipher specifically is that like the movie takes the time to articulate his perspective, which I don't think a
yeah
lot of movies bother with. I think a lot of movies would just be like, well, his family died, so he hates the world now he wants to blow everything up. Like it's that kind of like
yeah
weird character shorthand. Whereas I do like how like him and Neo are able to have this interaction where it's like, yeah, this is fucked up, isn't it? And
yeah
how his Cypher's own beliefs, like you kind of get like an evolution with his character where you feel like he probably once idolized Morpheus in the same way that Neo
yeah
kind of does, and like he's been in this game too long to where it's like, man, I am fucking burnt out. Let me back
yeah
in. Let me in. And it's totally
yeah
relatable. And like what he does is like despicable, but I think a lesser movie would not bother to give him that much space. And it's to a
for
credit that
sure
this does. And it feels like while you hate him, you don't think that he's unreasonable or irrational in that way.
yeah
Because you can understand the temptation of being like, yeah, I want to go inside the Matrix and taste my fucking steak. I want to, give me that shit. Give me my steak back. So I gotta wonder, like, what's the recipe for like uh the Nebuchadnezzar gruel, right? What's that
yeah.
gruel?
I want to know, yeah, what the recipe is for that liquor. You said it.
Also, I never noticed before. It's an interesting touch that Cypher's name in the Matrix itself is Mr. Reagan. That's interesting.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize that. I,
Also, I love this idea of like him and Smith are just like eating at a restaurant. you
yeah,
know, like it's such a strange like that they. It's like, all right, all right, Mr. Smith, what do you have? And let me take a look at the menu. Like
yeah.
what is he doing?
On second thought, I won't have anything after all.
Just a coffee, please.
Yeah,
Also, okay, that little bit where he's like, "Ignorance is bliss," and then like you cut to the girl playing the harp in the
yeah,
background, like that kind of corny shit. That's a Wachowski touch right there. That's what they love to do.
for
They like
sure.
that shit is like I oscillate between like sometimes it's too much in certain movies, but like it's one of those funny things where you can immediately recognize what kind of people made a movie where like little touches like that where it's like you didn't have to put that in there but you did and it's just like it's just fun, it's playful.
Yeah,
Also this is such
I
like
just
he's eating the steak, smoking a stogie, then you cut to like, all right, time for some more gruel out of the fucking faucet.
yeah, I don't know if it's it's probably it's I feel really with this movie like it's one of those things where I don't know which scenes are necessarily the iconic ones other than the like super iconic ones.
It's
But
all
for me
iconic to me.
the
It's all
yeah,
like just scorched into my memory. I got a tattoo of this movie on my brain cells.
yeah, the steak, the little steak um speech is one of the lines that I always quote to myself and others. It's just like I don't know, the way it's written is just so perfect.
Well, it's just a total encapsulation of a character's feelings, and it's
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I
using the
also would say
example.
like this movie is exceedingly well written and constructed. I mean,
Yes, yeah.
I don't know, like kind of to an absurd degree where you wonder like you know what I mean, because it's so iconic and it's so quotable and it's like lightning. Like you just
Yeah,
like how did this
lightning in a
happen? Again,
bottle.
I think over and over again, how did this happen to where everything came across in the way that it needed to, right? And it's because you're like when you watch a movie like Bound, you're like Bound's not really like a worse movie than this, but it doesn't have like the immediate iconography that this does.
Yeah,
And you just gotta
it's
wonder, like, yeah, just again, right place, right time. If we want to call it fate, then it's fucking fate, right? That this just
yeah.
it's funny to me to think about as well, where this came out in 1999. I think in '99, people, they were looking forward to Phantom Menace, and Phantom Menace was kind of seen as like this is the future of cinema, right? In a weird way,
Hmm.
because of the heavy use of CG. But in a fascinating way, like I think now, even for people who love the prequels, and like I don't hate Phantom Menace anymore, I used to, but like I think that movie is kind of like lost. Um, I think the later two prequels of that series have gained more traction, whereas that movie is like mostly, I would still argue, to like kind of discredited. Whereas this like feels so much more, again, like it still feels contemporary, it still feels fresh, and it doesn't like outside of like the cell phones, really it doesn't really have any dated elements, and I think the cell phones are fun. Like it's not like, whereas like Phantom Menace feels like a fucking live action cartoon at points.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
like it feels much more of its time and place, whereas this like avoids that in so many ways.
yeah. I think yeah, it's one of those examples where it's coming up to the new millennium. There was people were kind of looking for the way forward, and it's like you can take those two movies as like two big examples of like the blockbusters uh, that were essentially going to decide the direction of the next, you know, some years. And I think we we can kind of clearly see that, like, I mean, they're different movies trying to do different things for sure, um, but there was kind of this feeling, I think, of just like of trying different stuff, trying to move on from the '90s in a certain way, and
Yeah, and
definitely
I
The
think
Matrix
I think
was the
Phantom
decider.
Menace. I don't think anyone's really trying to rip that movie off.
Yeah,
Whereas, like, there's
exactly.
there's been so many rip-offs of this movie. Like, what is I just watched one like a year ago that what was it called? Fucking Infinite with Mark Wahlberg, where it was like
Oh my
this
god.
crossed with Highlander. It was like some of the stupidest shit I've ever seen. But you know what I mean? People are
Jeez.
still like trying to get this, right? Like all these
Yeah.
multiverse movies that come out now, they're like that are attached to IP. I mean, they owe so much to this movie. Like they don't exist without this. They really don't at all.
Yeah.
Although maybe they shouldn't exist. So maybe we should go back and stop
Yeah.
the Matrix from ever being released so that we can avoid
Yeah,
this hell that we're in.
that's the ultimate question is, do you destroy the greatest movie ever made so that a bunch of shitty movies aren't made?
You
I
know,
don't think I would. I wouldn't
you
be
know,
able to do it.
for me, the movie's worth the risk. Oh, we got to keep this. We got to keep it going. No regrets. Move forward in the future. Yeah, not to mention all the video games. I mean, this is such a like. How many
Oh
video
yeah.
games ripped this movie off? How many? So many. Oh my god. Like, I mean, Max Payne is probably the most obvious. It's funny
For
to me
sure.
that like those first two Max Payne movies, are not movies. Although there is a movie with Mark Wahlberg again. I don't know. Maybe he was onto something. Do you think Mark Wahlberg was like, I need my own Matrix. I need it. That'd be so strange.
He was plugged in. He was
He
trying to
was
make it
plugged in.
happen.
Yes, he's he was like, actually, I auditioned for Neo. No, I don't think that ever happened. Thank God. Yeah, the God, like yeah, the Max Payne video games and like how many games with like where you could turn on and off slow motion, like Super Hot, right? Super Hot doesn't exist without this
Yeah,
movie
yeah,
at
for
all.
sure.
And of course, like you take it back to you know like John Woo and stuff, and then you go back to the Samurai, and you go back to then all like the Humphrey Bogart noirs, and it all circles in on itself. It is funny to me though that like it's interesting how like that iconic Le Samurai like trench coat and like sharp dress suit, that whole style then again bled into so much of this, but like this has such more of a like a kind of quasi BDSM inflected thing with the leather. And yeah, like,
Yeah.
so
There's
to talk about like the Matrix ripoffs, what do you think is the best one? Like, what is the actual best one? Like a movie that is just like totally obviously a crib, but like you feel still works to some degree.
I man, I wish I was. I honestly wish I was more of an authority on Matrix ripoffs. I will say, this probably isn't the answer you're looking for, but I will say I feel that a very entertaining movie to watch is Equilibrium. Equilibrium
Yeah, with the great Tay
fucking
Diggs.
is yeah. It's, I mean, it's 1984, and just that did come out after the Matrix, right? It had to.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was 2002. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was like the first movie that tried to do gun fu, which didn't really
Yeah.
work out. And it's funny how Keanu had to then,
Gun kata.
Keanu had to come back in and then do it right with John Wick.
Yeah, he had to show
Oh,
him
you know
how it
what's
was
that's
done.
an interesting thing too, because Wanted also tries to do like crazy gun fu
Oh
stuff.
yeah, I still need to see
Yeah.
that movie.
You know what?
That's
Maybe
been on my
Wanted
mind.
is the best Matrix ripoff. I think that's the case. It's got to be, right? Okay, people who are listening, go fucking watch Wanted. It's awesome. Angelina
I've
Jolie,
heard.
James McAvoy, Morgan Freeman. It rips.
I've heard you rave about it, and I still have to see it, but
It's like one of like
I
the
really want to
ultimate
see it.
dumb guy Mountain Dew
Yeah.
Red Bull energy drink movies. So fucking silly.
So, what, Yui, do you have to tell us about the Oracle? Like, what, like, in terms of like we haven't talked a lot about like the kind of metaphysics of this movie yet. Like where does she where like not to put you on the spot, but like where does she fall in kind of the like almost the cosmology of all this? The
Well, now
I
that
don't
I'm
know.
on the spot, I think I'll stay here. No, with the Oracle, what I've gleaned um, over the course of my own occult studies and stuff is that like the agents are basically archons, right? In
Oh
like
yeah.
whatever kind of perspective you want to view them as, just that broad term of archons of like these agents of reality enforcement and like domineering the rules of existence and that kind of thing. And as the later movie reveals, right, Oracle is also an AI program, right? Just as the agents
Hmm.
are, and technically just as Neo is in a weird way. Um, so it's like the way that she articulates questions, she poses them as like challenges, right?
Hmm.
In a way that, like, again, where she's like, I'm supposed to say this, right? And really,
Yeah.
like when he says that I'm not the one, like she's really saying like, all right, it's up to you to say whether or not you are. Like I'm not going to tell you what you are. You came
Hmm.
here for your own validation, right? And you're going to find it. You need to find it in your own way, right? So she she does what a lot of like occult teachers often do, where it's like to teach you a certain principle or a certain path of thinking. It's you have to essentially be ready or not to receive what that is.
Hmm.
And like at this point in the movie, like Neo is not ready to receive that because he hasn't like actually participated in the fight like against the agents in the system, right? So
Right.
it's like, am I the one or not? It's like, well, like the one's like being in love, right? Like like no one can tell you that you're in love or not, right? Like that would be ridiculous. And
Yeah.
so, and like, but she tells him essentially what's going to happen, and that in that way, because again, she's seen this happen before with the previous iterations of the Matrix, right? So, like, she's confident in telling him, like, yeah, you're going to have to make this choice. And in occult teachings, like, you can offer people dichotomies like that, and essentially what you're doing is like placing a binary situation as like a some would call it like like a spell or a ritual, but done in the right way, it's like almost like a mind virus, right? Where
Hmm.
you can say, okay,
Yeah.
like L, tomorrow you're going to make a choice that's going to change the rest of your life. And because I say that, L, to you, and if if we're friends and you trust me
Hmm.
and you see me as like a position of authority on certain things, if I say, L, like, tomorrow, like a car might hit you or it might not hit you, right? But you'll know if it doesn't or not. Then tomorrow, like you're going to be hyper aware of that possibility and of that situation,
Hmm.
and because of that, you're either going to like take steps to be very safe, or you're going to take actions that will wander you into a path where like you will end up encountering that situation, right? Where you will either get hit
Hmm.
by a car or not. And not to use like such a a violent example, but you see what I mean though.
Yeah.
Like
You're gonna be obsessing over.
essentially what you're doing with that kind of thing that the Oracle does in this movie is you're
Hmm.
highlighting a person's awareness of their
Hmm.
environment and of their capacity to um, like enact their decisions, and to highlight their capacity for will in their life.
Hmm.
And like by basically just upfront asking them like, all right, like, do you think you're the one or not, but not really saying that, right? But like using an inquiring Socratic dialogue method to
Yeah.
draw it out of
Yeah.
him, you're essentially refining Neo's character, right? Like where it's he no longer after this moment has to have someone tell him that he is the one or not. He doesn't have to wait around for whatever. Like he has Morpheus's faith in him, and because of that, he takes the actions necessary to save Morpheus later. And because he does that, then he becomes the one, right? To where he
Yeah,
ultimately does it,
yeah,
out of love. He does it out of love for Morpheus. Then he comes back to life because he loves Trinity. And so, like, that's what it all ties into, is that by putting by taking that pedestal away from him, and by leaving him in a state of
yeah,
essentially like absolute freedom in a Hegelian sense, she's saying, all right, like it's sink or swim. Either you're going to do this or you're not. And because he's then like kind of divested of the expectations of being the one, he's actually allowed
yeah,
to be
yeah.
the one, right?
It's kind
So,
of
so
like
like
Morpheus
if
is
I
doing it.
oh,
Oh,
sorry, go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
Morpheus is doing him almost a disservice by taking him out, and eventually gets to Neo that he believes he's the one, and so it's almost, yeah, like you said, it's down to the Oracle to divest him of that, like, belief, and
it's a two-part thing,
every
right?
time I
Because like it's
yeah,
important that he has someone has faith in him, but he also
right,
needs to
right,
understand that like he needs to do something to earn that, right? That it's not just going to come
yeah,
to him. And so, like, to going back to the example before, right, Al? If I
hmm,
tell you that like there's a chance of you like getting hit by a car tomorrow, likely what you'll do is then you'll say, okay, well, I'm going to, like pay attention and go out of my way to not get hit by a car tomorrow, right? So what I'm ultimately doing is making you aware of your own mortal situation, right? Like it doesn't matter
hmm,
when I say that whether or not that would actually happen. What it means
hmm,
is that you're aware of the possibility that it could happen. And so again, like with the one, it's like by saying that I make certain that effectively you're going to be safe tomorrow, right? And by saying that, okay, you're not the one, she's ensuring no, he's going to discover that he's the one, right? And that again,
yeah,
he doesn't need to have someone verify it for him and impose upon it like almost like a mantle, right? Because in the other movies
hmm,
too, he doesn't act like he's like the big authority boss or whatever. Like there's a
yeah,
naturalism to him, like a Zen kind of mentality where he realizes like what he has to do, and doesn't really like have anxiety over that, right? He's just like
yeah.
when
It's
when the again in similar situation in Matrix Reloaded, when he gets presented with the choice of either you can save Zion or you can save Trinity, he's like, okay, well, I'm going to do both.
yeah,
And like whether or not the architect knows that, which I think he might, I think in a way I feel like he knows that just by posing that question and by offering that binary choice,
hmm,
like what you're doing is saying, okay, but what do you really want? And like again, refining and like almost an alchemical idea of distilling your soul into its purest essence of, like what does the one want to achieve? And ultimately, you know, he's like, I'm going to move past all of this. We see in Matrix Resurrections,
hmm,
you know, again, like Zion does get saved and it prospers, and he does get to save Trinity, right? And it's like
hmm,
this constant process of trying to refine who you are and understand what your desire is. And like this is what Aleister Crowley talks about of, the whole point of like uh you know magic and like whether or not you live in a simulation or some kind of fake reality or whatever. It's a saying if you did live in a matrix like reality, right, that was artificial and arbitrary, what would you do, right? Like
yeah,
what would you do to make your existence matter? And that's the
yeah,
point. The point is not whether or not that's like literally true or not, although it may be, right? The point is to make you realize that you do, you know, have some like something about you does matter, and you need to
hmm,
not only understand that but to take action to realize that and to do something that's worth your existence. And
yeah. You have,
yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense, but like that's kind of my
yeah,
broad thought process, and like kind of partly what these films are going into is where there is fate, there is destiny, there are situations that you cannot avoid, but you can always choose how you want to engage with those situations.
hmm, yeah, yeah, and it's kind of the pattern that that brought to my mind is just like you said, a series of kind of binary decisions presented to the protagonist, and just like basically in every case kind of trying to be like, okay, can I just move beyond this binary choice in the first place? Like, it's not that I'm trying to like weasel my way out of it. I'm trying to take on the responsibility of both options at once. And basically, I don't know, it's, yeah, just kind of showing um, that we have more agency than we believe we do. That our entire presupposition of like our lives and reality is is a little bit flawed, because basically we're not dreaming big enough, I feel like. um,
Exactly.
and yeah, anytime we're presented, it's kind of like presented as a challenge, but it's also, it's also the decisions that are presented to us
It's a
by
challenge, but
authority
it's a challenge
figures. And
to improve yourself and to be better.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly,
man, like
to
this
actually.
scene's always hard to watch. Like this, like I like that bit where he talks to Smith and is like, "You all look the same to me," you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
that
I
the
think that
film.
like it is such an interesting thing where like like in the way that like the idea of like the Agent Smith is like this whole army of like these guys who essentially turned anyone and everything into like these
Hmm.
like corporate suit, white guys, right? Like this again, this monolithic background presence that
Yeah.
just emerges anywhere and everywhere, and like that being contrasted with the kind of the messy individuality that all the resistance fighters are a part of, and
Hmm.
like it takes that whole idea and extrapolates it further because it's not just like, oh, the people in the Matrix are like passive victims, but in a way it's
Yeah,
like an emergent threat, where
yeah,
you're like,
the
fuck, like these guys literally could be anyone and everyone, and
yeah,
it's such a hard thing to wrap your head around, where like like those police guys who are like beating Morpheus up, like they're willingly engaging with that system of police brutality and racism
yeah.
from like with inside the universe of the Matrix, right? Like that's what they're doing inside their heads. And so it's like all those little things are refracted from this one basic way that reality is constructed.
Hmm. Yeah, it's I don't know, it's a good illustration of like of of how, in my opinion, like the kind of the regressive conservative authority figures are like constantly working to, you know kind of make the world worse. And it's an implicit uh, illustration of like if you want to think about like progressive struggle to make the world better, it's something that is just, it's constant. It needs to be, you need to have ways to keep yourself from getting overwhelmed or getting burnt out, because
Yeah, because
your
Cypher's the
enemy.
burnout. He's
Yeah, yeah,
like he
exactly.
effectively, as like is a guy who's lost his faith, and like that's the one thing you got to hold on to. You can't let someone take that away from you, because once like you lose that, like basically
Yeah.
you're in like a weird, quasi self-destructive but also malicious free fall. Yeah, but, this bit where like he's talking to them, like from outside the Matrix, is so great. Like because it's like it's suddenly like the reality of the situation becomes very apparent, and it's like, oh yeah, these guys are
Yeah,
just sitting around when they're in there doing stuff, and
yeah.
like you realize like, oh, like the vulnerability of that fucking sucks. So you think like the Cipher facial hair, you think that's making a comeback? I think like the
Oh
weird
man,
kind of like Fu Manchu mustaches. Can we bring that back into existence?
fucking APOC gets even less time than fucking Switch. I feel like.
Damn.
I Yeah, I don't know what to say because you know I've been seeing a lot of I've been going to shows locally and stuff, and I've seen a lot of people like young people with mullets, and I'm just throwing it out
Yeah, let's
there.
do it.
It's
Let's
coming
do
back,
it.
and honestly, I've always believed that some people can really pull it off. Depends on how they do it.
I think so.
Um, but so I'm not putting anything out of the realm of possibility for sure.
Yeah, we need to bring back like the Van Damme mullet that he has in Time Cop. And also the
Yeah.
mullet that Kiefer Sutherland has in Lost Boys. That's a great mullet. Bring it back, guys.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because the one, yeah, the Kiefer one is kind of almost goth. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of like spiky.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But just more of Cipher. It's like really at this point, even still at this point, Cipher has no reason to believe that Neo is the one. That's the fucking crazy thing. Neo like actually hasn't done shit so far, and there's 45
Well,
minutes left in the movie.
that's the interesting thing about like that, right? Because again, like the movie, like it makes sense what he's doing in a fucked up way. Where you're like, he's like,
Yeah,
yeah, like
yeah,
why should I fucking give a shit about this guy that like we're risking our lives over essentially? And you know, like this doesn't get talked about in the movie, but sometimes I wonder, like, were there people that Morpheus thought were the one before Neo?
right,
I
exactly.
wonder that. I don't think it ever gets talked about, but like I do wonder if it was like a series of false starts in some way,
Yeah,
or if they just
or
like knew what they were looking for from the start. I don't know. It's hard to tell.
or even is it possible that um well, on Cypher's individual level, maybe there is a time, maybe he never said it out loud, but maybe there's a time that he secretly thought that he was the one, or
I think
maybe the
that's a
entire
suggested thing. Yeah,
yeah,
I do feel
the
like that's true.
maybe the entire crew of the Nebuchadnezzar like is made up of people. It's kind of like that Evangelion thing where it turns out like all the students in that particular classroom are all technically like candidates to be pilots. It's like maybe every member of the crew was, for some reason or another, there was some information that led them to be kind of woken up, and it's like you have potential. You could be the one, and
That's right.
that would be a very interesting twist to it, but not unplausible. But it also doesn't necessarily change.
Yeah, it's just a nice
Uh,
theory to like think
yeah,
about. Oh, this bit with Smith. Well, okay, again, to talk about like the interiority that Cipher is gifted. Man, this whole bit with Smith, he gets more in the sequels,
yeah,
but this bit where like he's like, I fucking hate being here, and like I
yeah,
take joy in pushing you guys down and torturing you and all this shit, but I am doing it so I can get the fuck out because
yeah,
like I am not you and I don't like babysitting you and I don't like being a part
yeah,
of this apparatus. And I think that's such a fascinating idea that like that he's almost this Lucifer-esque figure
yeah, yeah.
where
It's
he's like, yes, I was created by the machines and I represent their will and interests, but they are not me any more than you are not them. And and like in the sequels it gets so much more into that where he's essentially just going to be like, I will fucking blow up the entire matrix, and
yeah,
like what I mean, just like render it into this like ridiculous thing. And like I just love that idea of that complexity being brought up where
hmm
even the guy who's supposedly like the monolithic enforcer for the system, he is he's like, I I am like no more free than you are in this. And like to
yeah,
talk about
yeah,
occult stuff, right? It's not like the archons are free, like and like they're super cool and happy because they get to rule over the universe. They're like, no, this is like a job.
Yeah,
Essentially,
they're
this
like
is
they're henchmen.
yeah, this
And
is I clock in, I clock out. Never really clock out actually. I'm just always clocked
yeah.
in, which kind of sucks. They never get any free time.
No such thing as a part-time archon.
Yeah. No,
um
I do wonder
yeah,
though.
I
Okay,
love
Smith gets
seeing.
out, right?
Mhm.
What do you think he does? What do you think? Like, what's like the first thing you think he does? He's like, oh, actually, so that's what tasty wheat tastes like.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, like, I don't
I almost
like
think that he doesn't
Smith.
even know.
Yeah, yeah, he's really just obsessed over this idea, which I very much understand. Like, he's obsessed about the idea that he's not free, and or like he's built up this idea of what it means to be free, you know.
You know what's the fascinating thing about
And
that though?
yeah.
Is that in Matrix 4, we do see that like some of the machines who join the human side and live like with them,
Right, right.
you gotta wonder, is that what he wants, right? Does he want to have a machine body outside of the Matrix?
Yeah,
Because when he possesses that dude in the second and third ones, you gotta
mhm,
wonder, like, he doesn't like being in that body, but you gotta think like maybe he does just again want some kind of physical manifestation,
yeah.
like a robotic, whatever that looks like.
Something that's still computer hardware, but like, you know, just like physical,
And it's kind of funny
in the
how
world.
at the end of Matrix 3, when and for people who get pissed off, like I'm sorry, I'm not gonna like say the full title of the movie every time. um, but
Yeah, yeah.
like yeah, in that third one, this whole dialectic between him and Neo, where it's like yeah,
Hmm.
like why do you persist? He's like, because I choose to. And it's kind of cool how in four where you have that post, that future where like Zion is now this kind of like utopia space where things grow and people are kind of happier.
Hmm.
Like that's you got to think that that's kind of what Smith, like, in a way it's almost like he gets to like have the thing he wants to, where
Hmm.
like again like the AI machines are now like unplugging from that system and then like joining an alternative system, even though he
Yeah.
doesn't get to be a part of it because he gets trapped by like the new version of the Matrix. Like it's kind of interesting how that plays out, where it's like even though he doesn't um again get to enjoy the fruits of that labor, his efforts are equally as as much as anyone's responsible for bringing about that, well, what happens in that. And yeah, it's like I don't know. And like what happens with this character in that fourth movie, it's I I, I wish there was like a little bit more because it's so fascinating the direction he goes in, where
Hmm.
it's like Mr. Anderson, you know anyone could have been you, but I'll always be everyone. Like
Yeah.
I do wonder if he almost like comes to a sense of peace in regards to that. I don't know, like what do you think? Do you think he like he makes his peace with the way that the Matrix is operated in that, or I don't know.
Honestly, I'm gonna need to go back and rewatch The Matrix Four. I saw it the one time in theaters, and I was actually kind of waiting because I was watching, or I was watching through the Matrix trilogy so that we could watch the fourth one together with my partner. And yeah, I can't believe they hadn't seen Reloaded and Revolutions. It's fucking crazy. We gotta
Wow.
rectify that right now. But just speaking in general about what I was going to say about Smith's kind of arc and where he's coming from, I think it just comes back to the fact that like that in his world in the Matrix, he's essentially the only one like him, and it's like, yeah, he can self-replicate, he can have,
Yeah,
you
because
can
the other
train
agents are
for
just
him.
kind of like schmoes. Like they're just basically like
Yeah,
helpers. Like they're just fucking assholes.
he's, I mean,
And you got
in
to
a
think like they're
way,
not having fun conversations together.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. They're not. fucking having stimulating philosophical, dialogues and shit. Um, got some VZ-58s in the back there. Those are not
Oh, dude,
AKMs. Those are
classic action
VZ-58s.
movie thing of like, this is impossible. That's why it's going to work.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, I think the thing about Smith is just that he is singular. He is truly like you can talk about definitely the tragedy of Cipher, but there's also this tragedy of Smith
It's
where
hard
it's
to
like,
be a god, right? You're like, well, fuck,
yeah, yeah,
like I
exactly,
have this utter control over this domain, but ultimately it doesn't fucking matter, right? Like
yeah,
in a way,
yeah,
he can never really attack anything meaningful, or like
yeah,
he doesn't even have the capacity to realize what he actually wants because he's so defined by like being a
yeah,
program.
yeah. There's nothing bigger than him in a sense. This is so Gnostic in such
It's
a
the smell.
yeah, in such a immediate. This is the very like immediate physical way that you like explain the basic concept of Gnosticism. Is
Yeah, it's so funny. There's like a million like ultra paranoid conspiracy podcasts
like
and like fucking YouTube videos that essentially have like taken every single clip from this movie and have put it in some way in like in intros and in like documentary clips. And
yeah.
I'm like,
Oh
man,
man.
the Matrix is not like a lecture, but in a way, it's become like a manifesto almost for this whole,
Yeah.
again, this neo Gnostic worldview, which really I think, okay, it's kind of silly to say, but this started right. Like for anyone who cares about Gnosticism or even Neoplatonism in like the 21st century, how can you avoid this? I don't think you can.
Oh
Also,
yeah.
the Don Davis music in here. Oh
Yes.
my god.
It's also yeah. It's reminiscent of like the Terminator score with all the samples of the metallic clanking and stuff. Ah, fuck. It's so perfect.
Holy shit. I love that guy. He's just like there's just immediate humanity to that. He's like, oh my god.
God, this is so fucking
So let's
badass.
just start with the fact that like this whole movie's third act is basically one giant action scene.
Yeah.
And like it is one of the greatest things ever
So many
conceived of by the
cops,
human race.
like
Um,
cops and security guards, and just various levels of tactical authority figures just getting their fucking shit ruined, and just like, oh man, it's yeah, it's kind of like if you thought they were holding out on you before this, you know, they rectify that.
well, because they just dump it all into the third act, and it's like
Yeah,
outside of movies like Terminator 2, this doesn't happen a whole lot, right? Like it really doesn't. And
yeah,
oh my god, it's just, okay. So like all this stuff with like the shattering bits of uh, what do you call it, like granite or concrete?
yeah. It's like
Like
the kind of marble-ish
it's
granite.
it's so goddamn good. It's so fucking good because it gives everything this like really tactile feel. And the behind the scenes of this, I mean, they planned these sequences out so meticulously, and like it shows. Like there's, I mean, it's just frankly, it's perfection in a way that like I don't throw the adjective of perfect around a lot. This
Yeah,
shit, I mean, I can't even talk over it because it's just so fucking pleasurable to watch. Like
yeah,
that bit where like that edit where like the shotgun flips over and she hits him with it, so good. Look at this. Look at this. This is like fucking like Stanley Kubrick, right? Like this like high frame rate when you see all the particles, the walls being shattered into a bajillion pieces flying through the air.
yeah.
You see him
You
doing
gotta
the
make sure that
somersault.
yeah, you gotta make sure that shit isn't hitting anybody. Like, or if it is, it's like not gonna be a big rock that fucking hits you in the head and knocks you out.
And this is, I mean, again, like the best non-John Woo evocation of the John Woo style,
Yeah,
where again,
absolutely.
it's like slow, fast, slow, like the perfect way of articulating that.
Yeah,
And Dude, that the okay, like the way he like he poses as he like finishes the kick, it's
Yeah.
so perfect. It's so fucking
It's
good.
because it's, like, kinda natural too, like, he naturally ends up in that position, but it is still this power stance, like, he's keeping his legs wide to maintain
Exactly.
balance, and his hand is right where he left it, where, you know, where it came down and,
But also, okay, that little like pillow shot where you see like the devastation at the end of the
yeah,
sequence,
yeah.
like that is how you do it. Like to be frank, that is like those small touches are what makes those scenes. Like that little like quiet bit of humor where like the little bit of plaster falls that hasn't
Yeah.
already been destroyed. Like that's how it's done. Like those kind of details to me are what separates like people who are oh, you're a good craftsman, like you know what you're doing. And then when you include that kind of thing, when you have the eye for that detail, that's what separates again the fucking the wheat from the chaff, the kind of the merely okay from like the masterworks and the artists. And like it's such a like a seemingly whatever thing, but to me, I like the more and more I've watched movies, the more it means a lot to me, those small tiny little gestures.
Mhm.
I love this bit. There is no spoon. Reminds me of the opening of Speed with the credits and the elevator.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this explosion. Okay, this is insane. I still don't know how they do it. Look at this. How do they do this? Like what the door bouncing? It's
Yeah.
so good.
Insanity.
Look at that. That CG fire looks better than anything I like any digital effect I've seen in like the past 10 years.
Yeah. We are fucking under attack.
Yeah, yeah, hell yeah, they are.
I also
I
love the
love the bit with
aesthetic
the
of,
throwing knife.
so badass. I
Dude,
love the
the bit with the
aesthetic of
with the throwing
having
knife of where like it then reveals him like underneath the figure of the guy. That's great.
yeah, having the SWAT guys carrying, like, the full size fixed stock, like, M16s is it's a very, like I think a lot of other people like that too. It's very, like,
Oh,
kind of
here it
almost
comes. Here
niche
we go.
aesthetic.
Whoa.
This Yeah, buddy.
I mean, this is the moment where like digital changes everything forever. Like, not that this is filmed digitally, but like the way that CG is employed in that with the camera, like
Mhm.
like nothing is ever the same after that shot. Oh yeah, the infamous dodge of this. Okay, the blood mist. The blood mist after that. Shout out to R-rated
Yeah,
action movies,
that
like the ones that we
that
don't get anymore, except for John Wick. Like, fuck, I miss it. I miss the squibs. I miss the blood mist. I miss it.
I want movies to be just covered in fucking blood and not necessarily be horror movies.
Yeah, no, I. That's what pisses me off too is that it's reserved for like horror shit, and like that's cool and all, but
Yeah.
fuck, I miss like movies like Die Hard 2 or The Last Boy Scout, where it's just the most gratuitous, mean spirited
Yeah.
violence that would happen, where like Bruce Willis would gouge out someone's eye with an ice pick, and you're like, holy
Yeah.
shit. I see we're bringing back the rain, but now it's like the sprinklers indoors. Yeah, these visual motifs getting repeated. Also, the bit where he's like, no.
Like the
Like, it's such a relatable, like, oh, yeah, that's all you could say, I guess, when you got a minigun pointed at you.
yeah. Got the fucking Predator minigun.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, look at this. Holy shit, dude. How, like, oh my god. Oh, I love the shots where you see, like, all the bullet casings falling down.
yeah, yeah. It's like very focused on like all the detritus and the just everything that's created from these action scenes.
Yeah, it's not just the
Yeah.
the violence and like the reaction shots of it. It's the environment. It's the like everything that goes into it has like a weird little
Mhm.
moment to it, and it feels like a total package where you get like almost like this hyper detailed focus on every single um, element that goes into a gunfight or a fist fight, and
Hmm.
like none of it is left to you like
It's like
again, nothing's wasted. Oh, this bit, I
all the
love this
ugly
bit.
bits.
Yeah,
Yes, Morpheus, you can break those chains.
yeah.
This-
Also, this bit where he shoots through the wall. Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, he's like fucking calculating that shit.
Oh, I love like the water running down the side of the building. That's a great touch.
Yeah, yeah. Even the helicopter is bleeding.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of the Michael Bay Transformer movies where like one of the Transformers will like get their head ripped apart, and then like a gusher of like red looking fuel will burst from it. And I'm like, is that thing fucking bleeding? Like it's
Oh my
totally
god.
insane. It's awesome. Again, bring back
Fucking
squibs. I want to see blood.
yeah.
It's great. Also, I think it helps to like, even though this is like a, we know it's like a virtual space, it helps keep the violence grounded in a way that matters and like feels like it's, I don't know, it's not just like, oh, I can get, punched or shot with a gun and like nothing
Yeah.
happens, right? Like that shit in PG-13 movies I fucking hate. Also, okay, this is one of the most incredible shots in any fucking movie in history.
It's the greatest like
This bit with the window, oh my god. Like it's completely insane.
like it's it's one thing to be able to direct kind of crazy action shit. It's another thing to be able to even conceive of action shots and conceive of situations like
Oh my
this.
god. Look at that. No, but okay, you know what makes that is when like we see it from inside the building, right? So when she like gets close to the camera, the glass breaks.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
good. You know what I mean? Like that, the kinetics of that scene, like everything is designed so much to just like make you feel the intensity of it, and
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like they thought out that so much, and fuck, I just love it. And like what's even cool is that you have like the Matrix thing before when he falls into the ground and it kind of bounces.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the helicopter hits the thing, and it's like almost like an earthquake happens on the glass of the building before then the program remembers that it's supposed to
Yeah.
break, and then it all breaks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is what I was kind of talking about before, like the difference between like having someone tell you the knowledge of you being the one and then you
Mhm.
just acting like the one, right?
Yeah. You need to yeah, you need to fill that role and grow beyond it like on your own in order to actually make it happen.
Oh man, this bit with the subway. You know,
The
okay,
dust, man.
the
All the
the guy
dust.
with the homeless man.
Mhm.
I okay, in the John Wick movies, right? You have this whole thing where it's like, oh man, like even like the a lot of the homeless people of New York are secretly assassins, right?
Yeah.
And there's that thing in John Wick where like basically everyone is some kind of assassin, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like almost like weirdly normalized where people don't react too much to when a gunfight starts happening around them in New York City. Like someone will die and people just continue walking. That is such a, because like Chad Stahelski worked on these movies as like Keanu's
Mhm.
stunt guy, right? And like that inflection is very similar to me to how the agents manifest here, right? It's like
Yeah.
the agents in this movie, they could be anyone, anything, anywhere. Whereas like in the John Wick movies, again, it's almost like
Eh,
the idea of like there's more assassins in the world than there are people to get assassinated
yeah,
in that
it's a
funny way. Like
very good point. Yeah.
yeah, like there's a stylistic absurdity and a heritage there where it's like very graphic novelty. Oh, dude, that shot where like the
Yeah.
phone shatters in slow motion quickly before it
Oh my
cuts.
god.
Mr. Anderson.
The score is so fucking
Dude,
great.
the Don Davis
It's
score for all
unanimous.
30 of these movies, like again, just
It sounds
unassailable.
so grandiose, and it just builds this tension and just like, yeah.
Oh, this little like spaghetti western thing.
Western, yeah.
Do it Wachowskis. When are you gonna do a western? I want to see that shit.
Oh
Although
fuck
to be
yeah.
honest, it would probably
This
end up like that Sam Raimi western, The Quick and the Dead, which is like total gonzo crazy shit. Also, this is another bit from The Killer where like they're both pointing guns at each other's heads and like they're both
Oh yeah.
empty.
That's a very John Woo thing. Just like the mixing of the very up close and personal with the like just
Over the top.
grandiose violence. I love how like the fight scenes are kind of structured like they always start out like just seeing like just feeling each other out, like seeing where their respective like, skill levels and power levels are at, basically seeing what works, and then, you know, getting more brutal as they actually get frustrated and try to actually take out their opponent.
Yeah, I mean, like so many martial arts movies have that same structure.
Yeah.
It's like the Wachowskis very much did their homework. It kind of reminds me of like the MGS4 final fight, right? Where like
Yeah.
you just get to see these two fuckers just like beat the ever loving shit of each other to the point where like it doesn't even
Yeah.
matter, right? It becomes like funny and then it becomes not funny again.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, the little pose he does where like the dust shakes off him, like it's that touch,
One of my
right?
favorite.
That's what makes it.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments.
Also in this scene, you notice they do a lot of like violating the 180 rule in
Mm.
this, where you're not really supposed to like cut ideally between like the opposite of where you just put the camera, but they
Oh
do a
yeah.
lot of that here, and it's pretty effective at like showing. I would say like the overall space, right? You get like a very good sense of what the overall geography is,
Yeah.
and I think like in the way that the fight gets like like who's domineering who in the fist fight, like it does a good job of communicating that. So like
Hmm.
it's a good example of showing that there are certain like rules and techniques in movies that like get talked about where it's like you're not supposed to do this or that, but when employed correctly it can actually be really effective.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it's also in part due to the fact that they they know the set is it's kind of simple enough. Like, they
Where
do
you're
a
not going
really
to be
good job of
confused by it.
showing, yeah, of just showing like the train platform when they first go down there together, and you can reasonably infer where they're at any given time. So it's a good role to break there. So the agent dead names Neo, and Neo fucking corrects his ass.
Yeah, this is like a sign, guys. Just I'm not going to say that you should like throw your local turfs underneath subway
Yeah.
trains, But I will say that the world might be slightly better if you do so.
Who can really say,
Who could say,
the world, there's definitely the possibility out there that, you know
you know, so like when I watched this movie as a kid, I watched the DVD where they colored a lot of things differently, and they made this movie
Mhm.
a lot more green. Um,
Yeah.
Whereas now, like this 4K version that I'm watching, like it honestly looks a lot better, and the contrast between the Matrix and the Nebuchadnezzar, like the Nebuchadnezzar is like very cool blue, and the
Mhm.
Matrix is kind of like soft green.
Yeah.
Whereas that recolor they did for the DVD release, like it just made everything look really lime greeny, and
Oh, yeah.
like it's weird because the photographic style to this first one is different from the second and
Yeah,
third,
definitely.
and not in a like a bad way or a worse way. It's just it's conceptually different. Those other movies are much more, I would almost like more monochromy, whereas this one does, like there are more flashes of color. Again, it's
Mhm.
just a bit less contrasty in that way. Whereas I think, yeah, again, just the other ones like lean so much more into that more like noirish, high impact color
Mhm.
palette. Um, but yeah, it's like that. I always find that funny in like movie series that, because like it's the same cinematographer, I think, and like movie series where like you get to see how the visual style changes as it goes along,
Yeah.
and you watch like the John Wick movies, right? And the first one, like it doesn't look bad, but it feels like very much like a low budget quasi DTV adjacent movie. Like it's a little bit
Yeah.
washed out. It's a little bit like there's color, but it's not crazy, and the shadows are sometimes a little bit soft. Uh, and then you get to like John Wick 3 and it looks like a fucking graphic novel, right? Like everything's
Yeah,
neon,
hyper
everything's
stylized.
dark, everything is like lens flares and all this crazy shit. Like it becomes much more of again like this uh like interesting, more unrealistic
Yeah.
artifact, I think in a good way. And you go to Matrix 4 and that movie
Yeah,
looks very different from these three. I think it's again
that's
like a lot more hard blacks, a lot more frankly like a more kind of yellowish tinge to it. um
mm,
and yeah, it's just fascinating, like those choices that get made.
yeah, that's the fourth Matrix is definitely, um like I said, I need to rewatch it because I just need to, remember all the all the shit that goes on. But also, I remember one of the number one things, or the number one thing I probably came away with, was just like how interesting that movie looks, like the way of, showing the non-reality of the new Matrix, versus, there's some absolutely gorgeous shots, um like outside, I want to say it was outside of the Matrix, once they kind of abandoned that, like, because they do a good job without just using like color tinting like in the first movie, of just showing this, like, making it feel really gross in the new Matrix.
Well, in the new one it's almost like
It's like
aseptic,
too polished.
and
Yeah.
it reminds me a lot of Tony Scott, frankly, in the way that everything is a
Okay.
little bit acid toned and kind of like,
Mhm.
not in a bad way, but like there's a little bit of like a vomit color scheme going on, and
Yeah.
like it just feels a little bit sickly. Whereas this, there's a little bit more grime to it. There's a lot
Mhm.
more
I love how
like
grimy.
texture, what's going on, and plus it's
Yeah.
like film stock instead of digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, in an interesting way, it kind of feels like what like this era of trilogies, right? The Matrix trilogy, Pirates of the Caribbean, Lord of the Rings, kind of the last big, huge, like studio franchises or whatever to be made with film stock. I think that's kind of what
Mhm.
makes them hold up really well. Is that like they all have very strong visual identities, and so like you can watch them and you just immediately get a sense of what you're seeing just by the way that things look. Like again, you could take
Mhm.
any screenshot of this movie and you could be like, "What movie is this from?" People will probably tell you, "Oh yeah, that's The Matrix," even if they don't
Yeah.
know like the specific actors
Yeah.
or whatever that you're looking at. Oh, this shit. Okay, like again, not to get too personal. Like I watched this in theaters right after my sister died, and like this whole
Mhm.
bit where like Trinity is talking to him like you can't be dead because I love you. Like that
Mhm.
hit me like a freight train. It hit me so fucking
Yeah.
badly at that moment, and like I just started crying in the theater. It was fucking intense. I mean, like this movie again. How many times? Just I must have seen this like at least 50 times, and it still has a huge emotional resonance for me. Like I just
Yeah.
get chills during this entire
I
climax bit,
get
and
goosebumps during, yeah, just
he's
huge
beginning to
swaths of the movie.
believe. And he repeats the Agent Smith no. He's like,
Yeah,
"Let's
and
fucking go."
he does what they were not able to do before.
Exactly.
Does what he wasn't able to do before, basically.
I love how they're all looking at it, being like, okay, like, okay, what do we do now? I don't know." I'll do like the rousing Don Davis music, and then again, when we
Yeah.
see him now, he sees with the code. Like again, all the thematic narrative bits just coalesce into this one moment in the movie.
Yeah.
It's masterful. And this bit where like he's fighting, but he doesn't really have to think about it. He's just like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right."
The entire time before that, he had his own mental block. This is what Morpheus is trying to
Now he's just operating on
divest
like
him of.
pure intuition.
Yeah. It's like you need to
He's
get
not
out of
trying to
your
hit
own
him. He's
way.
just hitting him.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Now this bit, I love this shit. Where he goes inside him, he's just like, and the other agents are like,
he's like
excuse me?
he's just like he's like, fuck it, just let me just remove the middleman. Like, I'm just gonna fucking
Yeah, why are we gonna fight? I'm just gonna go inside you. Oh, like him being ripped apart, like all these different fragments. Reminds me of that bit in the Mouth of Madness, right? Where like he tears himself
Oh,
off like at the page.
yeah. That one moment does
Another very
kind of make
proto
me want
Gnostic
to.
movie.
Oh yeah,
And these
that
guys
one
look at
moment.
each other. I love that. But they're like, okay, we're not even gonna try. We're just gonna get out of here.
Yeah, that's another perfect little moment of just little humor, just like, and see, that's the thing. I feel like, with what we complain about with like the Marvel quippiness and shit, is like moments like that where they just looked at each other. It's like it's actually what they would have done. It's like, okay, just confirming that this other guy wants to get the fuck out of here too. They're still
Well,
programmed.
it's
You
silent storytelling, right? Like
Yeah,
it's not meant to be like a wah wah. It's more like a yeah,
yeah,
that's what you would do if you just saw that happen. Especially these guys
yeah,
who are so used to being, the overdogs, like
hmm,
seeing that kind of crazy shit is like, all right,
yeah,
you know what? We need to regroup and figure out what the hell we're gonna do.
yeah. And it's like, if you're really, I feel like if you're really doing your job as like a storyteller, you don't have to betray the character's essence in order to input those little comedic moments. Like, you can have the character still act, faithfully to themselves, and
That's exactly right.
yeah,
You
have it
can
be entertaining.
keep the integrity and like still find humor within that. It's like it's the difference between a gag and like an authentic joke. I think where like gags are
Hmm.
cheap and jokes have resonance, and like jokes are still funny even after like they have like a momentary bit of like, oh, that was cute, but like the cuteness doesn't last. Also, this fucking needle drop at the end. This shit's so good. This shit is so good.
This stuck with me as a young kid so well.
What's so great with this ending is that like when he does what he's about to do, I just feel so pumped, and I'm like, fuck yeah,
Yeah.
you could do anything, anything's possible. You know, it just leaves you with like the perfect note.
Yes.
I mean, one of the great endings, right? Like
Every time.
it's like you just again you watch this in a theater and you're like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna go out and like run for 5 miles right now.
Yeah. Exactly. Ah,
There you go. Fuck yeah. Rage Against the Machine, people.
there was some kind of meta commentary with uh their selection of the song, and also in Resurrections the selection of a cover of the song. uh
Oh, that's
I
right.
read
Yeah, I
about,
forgot about that.
and I can't remember exact. I'm just basically saying that as a bookmark. Like there's there's something behind it. But
Oh,
yeah,
we didn't talk about
just
Carrie Ann
every
Moss
decision.
really. Like, okay,
Yeah, we did
Carrie
a
Ann
little
Moss,
when she showed up, but
a goddess, to be frank.
yeah,
Um, I kind of wish she did more. I wish she, because she's so good in this and
yeah,
Memento, and she doesn't really do that many movies. And
mm,
like, obviously, I think she has like her own thing going on, and she's like a parent and everything. But
yeah.
yeah, just I don't
She
know.
needed. It's more of that thing where I feel like she needed more stuff. She was uh that was worthy of her, basically.
I think she's a lot
Um,
like Linda Hamilton, where it's like you have this great talent, and then like there just wasn't an alignment between that
yeah,
and
yeah,
what was needed. But I'm so thankful that we have these movies.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, kung fu choreographer Yun Wu Ping.
Human Wolfing.
So yeah, like final thoughts on this movie.
Well, it's pretty good, Yui.
Yeah, it's
I'd have
okay,
to
I
give it
guess. Yeah, it's
a
fine. It's all right.
5.5 out of 10. No, yeah,
5.5.
yeah, um, yeah. There's I feel like there's still a lot to say, but I won't like drag on too long. I This is for sure my favorite movie of all time. You know, I feel stupid that sometimes when I say that in a more casual context with people I know less well, you say, oh, The Matrix is my favorite movie. You feel a little bit like weird, because for a while there it was like, oh yeah, of course The Matrix is your favorite movie. It's like the biggest movie ever. It's the greatest action movie ever, whatever. Um, and then later it felt a little bit like, almost like cheesy to say in a weird way, but I don't really
Yeah.
know where that came from, because
Well,
it's like
I think
every
what
time I
happened is
watch
it
it.
got so overexposed in a lot of media, and
Yeah,
there were so many parodies of it that it kind of became like a little bit of a punching bag.
yeah,
But I think this is a movie that a lot of people like, that a lot of people enjoy without really understanding it. And I'm not saying that, like, you have to be like some genius or whatever, but like the depth that this has in terms of again, like tapping into stuff like the Invisibles and Philip K. Dick and Gnosticism.
mhm,
Like a lot of people will like read that and they'll be like, "Oh, I get it," but they don't really get it, right? Like they don't
yeah,
like. It's just not. It's a movie that I think that's well liked, but not well understood by a degree of
mhm,
its admirers, and even the people who are like, "Oh, it's all about being trans." Like, yes, that is a part of it, but also
yeah,
like no one really knows about the occult background of this movie, or again, the stylistic references. And people watch this, right, and like this is their idea of like Yuen Wu Ping or whatever, and they won't go back and watch the original Hong Kong movies or anything. So in a
yeah,
weird way, it's kind of stuck in the unfortunate position of being like a gateway film to a lot of things,
yes,
but like not a gateway that a lot of people pass through fully, right? It's like how people watch Kill Bill, they'll be
exactly.
like, "Oh yeah, that's kung fu," and it's like, well, yes, but
It
also there's this whole other thing. Like, have you
yeah,
watched Chang Che movies? Have you watched King Hu movies? And the answer is no, they haven't. So yeah, this is again, it's just it's one of those weird things where it became instantly iconic, but it also kind of became the endpoint for that iconography. It's so singular
Hmm.
that it's like, where do you go? Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. It's it's a very interesting and uh, I don't know. It's a very like in a way, it's almost kind of more affirming and like exciting to go back and see those movies and things that deeply influence the Matrix, because you realize just how artfully they were able to synthesize all those different influences down into like one thing. And like it's kind of rare that that happens, because sometimes, you know, an influence is very singular and it's like, oh, they just, you know, they just ripped this off. But with the Wachowskis and the Matrix, it's like truly is like equal parts of a lot of different things.
yeah. It's
And
not just one
it's,
bit.
yeah, it becomes this kind of beautiful um like kind of kaleidoscope of stuff together, and it doesn't take away from it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess it's all right. It's a pretty good movie, but
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
kind of at the end
It's,
here. L, do you have anything that you want to share with anyone listening? Got a Twitter? Working
sure.
on anything with
Yes,
your band?
yes.
Where can people find you?
So, assuming that Twitter survives for longer than as long as it takes for, you know, for this episode to be uploaded, you can find me at DJ 90s Hentai. That's where I've been for a long time. I'm in a band. We are on like Instagram and Twitter and everything at U Damon Band. That is EUDAEMON. We're recording new stuff right now. I'm very excited for it. And finally, right now I have a account on Instagram where I'm just kind of using it as a catch-all to post my creative projects at Deep Rift Dweller. And yeah, I'm starting to build guitars. I do visual art and stuff, and there are not enough hours in the day to do all that kind of shit. So yeah, but yeah, once again, thank you so much for having me on, Yui. And I feel like I would never be able to do this movie true justice, but here I am. I don't know.
All right. Well, there we go then. That's the Matrix. I really feel like they should have given him his phone call. Don't know what's up with that. Just give it to him.
Yeah, it's not like he's gonna, like, who's he gonna call? His boring ass family that like probably lives back in the Midwest and is boring.
I mean, as a person from the Midwest, I'm kind of insulted. I think. Hold on.
I'm
I'm gonna
I'm
take you to task. Hold on. Just let me. I'm gonna kick your ass.